watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser. I've worked as either a director or animator on more than 30 projects, both short and feature length, and my favorite projects have been Layers, my short film, and these books, which I wrote, illustrated, and pitched at several studios as feature films. And today we have a wonderful guest, Brenda Chapman. Brenda is not only a wonderful person, she directed Brave and Prince of Egypt, and recently Come Away, which debuted at Sundance. And I had the privilege of attending that premiere. It was a wonderful experience. How are you doing today, Brenda?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And I'm excited to talk about these various topics that I have selected. The first one is actually Come Away. So Come Away has had its Sundance debut. You've had a little bit of time and space to kind of let the dust settle from that. What do you feel was the strongest aspect of your work on that film?
I feel like the work with the kids was really great. I felt really good about their performance and what they brought to the story, and the look of the film, the cinematography, I was really proud of.
It was so good.
I'm thank you. But the story was just a beautiful story that Marissa Goodhill wrote, and beautiful script, and so it was a challenge to try to get that to the screen.
Yeah, I bet. Especially because you're used to this very slow and steady movement on animation, and with live action you had probably a limited amount of time to work with these people. You had to work in a way that you weren't used to, capture a performance like in the moment. And how was that process?
It was a learning curve for me.
Yeah.
But it was a little stressful because I'm used to an animation being able to storyboard it, see if it's working, not, okay, let's redo it or let's tweak this or that. And so trying to make sure we had everything we needed, with the performances and with the shots, that was a whole different mindset. I had to wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
Because
oh, sorry.
No, because storyboarding is the coverage for animation,
Yeah.
and it's fairly cheap, in comparison, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love storyboarding. And I have a question about, actually, speaking of storyboarding, so there are different paths that different directors take to becoming a director in the animation industry. One of them is generally animation, and the other is generally storyboarding. What do you feel a director can learn from storyboarding that you wouldn't learn if you came up through the animation track?
I think you're trained in the bigger picture in storyboarding. I mean, you're given a sequence and you have to look at that as a whole, but you also have to look at that as how it fits into the bigger film. So you're constantly seeing what your other story artists are doing and making sure you don't have repetition, or if the repetition is on purpose to lay pipe for certain character traits or within the story and the plot and everything. So you have the script, which is sort of the groundwork, but then the storyboards really flesh everything out. So you're also looking at character arcs and just the bigger picture, where as an animator you're taking more the actor's approach and just focusing on the character. Now I'm remembering the traditional days where an animator would just have one character and they would work on that character team. Now a lot of animators work on scenes, so they get to work on all the characters, but still you're focused on that one scene as opposed to the entire sequence of the film. For instance, in in Brave, the scene would be, it's the single scene where it's maybe you just see Fergus eating his dinner.
Yeah.
But that's a scene. But a sequence is the whole dinner scene or sequence, which would be the mom and the triplets and everything together. So that, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but
I love tangents.
but you're focused on one thing, basically one little part of the film as an animator, whereas a story artist, you're focused on a bigger part of the film, and you have to keep the entire film in mind as you're working.
Yeah. I would agree with that too. And having been freelance for a while, I end up, even though I advertise myself as an animation freelance guy, I end up doing a lot of the storyboards, and I feel like that's been excellent preparation for the directing role. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And I actually we had a head of story on recently, was working at Skydance. And we asked him lots of questions about that, but that's one question I actually didn't ask him because he came up through the storyboarding ranks, and he
Was
wasn't
that Brian
in
Pimentel?
It was Greg Harmon or Glenn Harmon. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Brian Pimentel's another one you should talk to.
Oh.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's worked with Kevin, my husband, Kevin Lima,
Okay.
on many projects, and he's a really great head of story as well.
Awesome. I will
I'll have
look
some
into
great stories for you.
I bet. I bet. So now that you finished the project, is there anything you would do differently? Now that all that you've learned on that project, is there anything you would do differently on your next project? If it were live action.
Oh, live action project. One thing is maybe I wouldn't do it again. I don't know.
That's a good solution.
No, I just learned a lot, and it's more the minutia of things that I would do. I would certainly be much more involved in the budget and the planning of where the money would be spent. I felt like that because I was so focused on figuring out the creative aspect, I let other people deal with that, and I wish I had been much more involved in that. So,
and what impact would that have had you been involved in that?
It
what would it have solved?
We had a lot of issues with the VFX and everything, and I think I would have been more involved with choosing the companies and the vendors and where that would have been done and how it would have been done. Also, music. It just seemed like everything was, last minute seat of your pants, and that's I think independent filmmaking.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
but I mean, I'm very happy with the music, but it came so last minute. Yeah, I'm so happy to have found John Debney. He's a lovely man, incredibly talented, and did a beautiful job. So
yeah,
no complaints. I just wish we could have brought him in earlier. So
yeah. Now that you've done the live action, what tools do you think you have now to bring back to animation?
I think working with actors, I've learned a lot more because in animation, they're just in the booth, and you have very comparatively very little interaction with the actors, other than just that recording session. Where here, you're prepping them, you're talking them through, you're discussing where they're going to move, how they're going, and the blocking of a scene and all of that. And the relationship with the actors I found was very enlightening, and I'd like to bring some of that more into animation.
Yeah. Like that. Yeah, cool. Now I'm sure that somebody is going to wonder while they're listening to this, when can they see Come Away? It's currently March 3rd. We're in quarantine in 2020. So,
yeah, everything has slowed down. My producers are currently in negotiations with a distributor, but because of everything that's happened, that sort of slowed the whole process down. So your guess is as good as mine at this point. I'm sort of wishing that in Netflix, they'd, as opposed to theatrical, I wish it maybe had gone to Netflix so people could be watching it now.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So we're all waiting to see.
Awesome. Well, I'll look forward and I'll promote it when it comes out. So
thank you.
excited to share it with people. So what are the this is a tough question too. Be forewarned, when I gave this question to Kevin, he's like, "You've got tough questions." What are the ingredients for a truly successful feature film?
Oh Lord. That is a tough one. I think it's character, number one, an empathetic character that that the audience can empathize with.
Hmm.
Uh, um, and a good story is just a story that holds your interest, but your characters are the main thing that I think is if an audience can relate to the characters and empathize with what they're going through and root for them, to me that is the main ingredient of a successful story.
Oh
Um,
yeah. When I would
uh,
say those things about Come Away, I was definitely like completely engaged with the characters, and I
oh,
loved
thank you.
how much breathing room they had too. It was nice. Everything is so fast paced nowadays that it was nice to have just a little
Yeah.
bit of time to breathe and to spend some time with Angelina Jolie and that little girl, she was beautiful.
Oh yeah,
She was really
yeah.
beautiful, and she matched
Kira
so well with the older version. I can't remember her name. Is it Gugu?
Gugu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She's a beautiful actress too.
Yes,
Great
she
actress. I
is.
love the way
Yes, she is.
she works. So
She was wonderful. Yeah. The whole cast was just amazing. I was really happy with how everyone handled everything.
yeah, yeah. And you said what? Oh no, you said you want a relatable character. What makes a character relatable for you? What are the kind of the
Um,
building blocks or the touch points for that?
well, it's a character where you can see what they're going through. You understand the 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 journey that they're on. You understand that you have empathy for what their flaws are.
Hmm.
So, because we're all flawed and we
Oh
know
yeah.
it, as much as we try to hide those flaws, but we are.
Yep.
And so when we see someone struggling with a flaw and trying to fix it or trying to deal with it, I think that's what, to me, is what the audience is rooting for. It's like either accept that flaw and embrace it, uh, or you're rooting for them to fix that flaw. So it just depends on what the flaw is. But
Yeah.
but but that's what, to me, the am I answering the question?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. I was just like, did I miss?
Yeah, you were saying
Yeah.
that you need to be able to relate to their journey, that you also need to be able to relate to the flaws that they have and the struggle that they're
Yeah.
going through to either embrace the flaw or overcome the flaw.
Right. And that
Yeah.
is the journey. That's the real journey. They may be going from point A to point B to point C to fix it. That's the physical journey, but it's the inner journey that I think that the audience is really rooting for.
Oh
Even
yeah.
though you can have the excitement of the chase or the this or the the travel or the jumping through hoops or whatever, you can.
Yeah.
That's the visual
The
excitement, but
big
the
music
inner.
numbers.
Yes, but it's what the character is going through on the inside is what I think the audience really connects to.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there are way too many films that are void of that.
Yes.
I think it's because it's hard to be vulnerable. And in order to create something like that, you have to be vulnerable yourself as you're writing. And
Right.
that's a tricky place to be for all of us.
Yeah.
I was gonna say for some people, but I think it's for all of us.
Yeah. It can be hard.
Yeah. So here's another component to that question about the ingredients to a successful feature film. Obviously, we can't make the perfect film. As much as I've tried, even in a short film context, to make something perfect, I haven't been able to do it yet. I don't think I'll
I
ever
don't
get there.
think anyone has.
So, what are your benchmarks for? Okay, this project was successful for you personally.
For my benchmarks. It's the benchmark is if if I can still feel something when I'm working on it. If I'm uh if as I'm boarding a scene or if I'm watching a scene that I've directed or a sequence or whatever, and I feel something. I'm excited, or I cry, or I laugh, or whatever. It feels genuine. I know I've done something wrong when I don't feel something. I think it's more about what's not there as opposed to what's there. uh,
Yeah.
if I that's a tough one, Scott.
It's okay. We've got time.
Yeah.
And I like that answer. Like, if you felt something, I thought of Glenn Keane. I don't know where I heard, but he almost felt like he went a little too far with Ariel's performance when he had her reach toward the screen.
Uh-huh.
And I can't remember where I heard that. I think it was in the You Are a Storyteller podcast. But he thought he'd gone too far, and yet to this day, that's the comment he gets most on is how people related to that.
Yeah.
How they felt like Ariel, or like she was reaching for them, or
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think he maybe kind of wondered if it was a little cheesy, a little too on the nose.
Uh-huh.
But I think it was only that way to him because he'd spent so much time with the character and he knew her so
right.
well.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also think that's the fine line we walk, is it too cheesy if you try to make someone cry, or you try to touch someone, but I think we all try to walk a fine line, and that to me is the joy of storyboarding, because you can
then you can
test
see
things out. Okay, people say, oh, that was cheesy. Okay, so we went too far. That's the nice thing about being able to test it before you actually put it on the screen. So
yeah, interesting. And you said, and I hope this is okay for me to share, but after the screening I went up and we talked to you with your sister-in-law and you said that you couldn't see the project anymore. You couldn't see Come Away anymore. You get that way more so with animation or with live action?
both. When
Yeah.
at the end of Prince of Egypt, that was hard for me to see. Now I can watch it, and I remember, how I felt while I was making it, and I still see all the flaws that make my teeth hurt, but
which no one
and
else sees.
Simon's and Steve's, we all see it, but yeah, right after a film, it's hard for me to be able to, because you've just been working on it, and you just can't see anything. It's hard to know.
Well,
So
that was so relatable and so human when you said that, because I instantly knew what you meant. Especially layers. Because I labored over that piece so much that when I released it to the public, I really couldn't see it.
yeah,
And people would say things about it, and now that the dust has settled a little bit, I actually have things in my mind that if I were to go back, I would change these things about the story.
right.
And at the same time, it's still opening doors for me. So it's like, well, okay. I think it was successful because I grew and I definitely felt something. I like that standard that you've laid down. So yeah, I was gonna say, oh, there's this sad thing about having been a creator of something so detailed, is that you'll never experience it for the first time.
Right.
Yeah, somebody's talking about Cirque du Solitude. They were reading it and how much they were enjoying it. And I was like, boy, I would love to experience that story for the first time. I have no idea how that would be. The only way I can know is when they tell me their story. What were you saying?
Yeah, that's the hard part. It's like you enjoy it while you can do it, and enjoy that first fresh experience of the creating of it, and then you just sort of have to let it go, and look for that other thing to experience for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there are plenty of those. I go back and I mine black and white movies. Oh, another point that that I thought of something as you were mentioning it was that sometimes we walk a fine line between being too corny and not subtle enough, I guess. And it was interesting that Frank Capra, who directed It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I love his films. I love his directing.
Oh, I do too.
And they've really stood the test of time. And yet, back then, they would call it Capricorn. Like they always said he was too corny with the things, or too lighthearted. It's like, were you paying attention? Because It's a Wonderful Life, it gets dark.
Yeah,
It
it
gets really
does.
dark.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
But he lets it go from one to the other, and
Yeah.
I think that's the joy of it. And it's also, it's with all the darkness of so many stories on Netflix and all of that. And I love Netflix and I
Oh
love the
yeah, me
dark
too.
stories. I
Yeah.
just realized that I've gone through some of them where the end is so dark that I just feel like, why did I spend my time on this?
Yeah, I
Because
actually had one like that too. Go ahead, keep going.
no, I just want to, I want to feel some sense of resolution. I want to feel some sense of hope. I want to feel some sense of lightness at the end, but when a story ends on there's no hope, or it's such a,
Yeah.
downer, that it's like, I can't do films like that. I can't make film. The whole reason I got into this was for escapism, for it to give people who have a harder life a little joy, a
Yeah.
little something to take, lighten their load, to take away, something that they can look back on and be happy about. So
Yeah.
I just have a hard time. I don't mind tragedies and that kind of thing, as long as there's a glimmer of hope within them. But
Yeah.
but there's so many that are so dark that you're like, ugh, that I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, I even saw a film recently, and I won't say which one it was,
Yeah,
but
I'm not saying which ones I'm talking
that's
about.
safe. But it actually did have a happy ending, and my wife is just so sensitive to certain things, and she was crying into the night after I watched that film. And I think when the movie stopped, I could hear her upstairs crying about it, and I just sat there and I thought, was this actually worth it? Because people had recommended it to me. You learn so much. He's a great filmmaker, this and that. Well, now you know the gender of the filmmaker, but that doesn't make it easier to narrow
Well,
it down.
hey,
Because if it
that's
were
going to be
female,
a
it'd be easier.
huge, amount. Male filmmaker,
Yep,
could
yep.
be anything. You said female, then we could probably narrow it down.
Yeah, but I didn't think it was worth it. I don't think what I came away with was worth having gone through the experience. And that's a sad thing to say, but how how it landed, especially because I had to sit up and console my wife the rest of the night and talk through like why it was such a
Oh,
hard thing for her to watch that,
aw,
and apologize for not listening to her sooner earlier in the movie.
aw. I don't want to watch the rest of this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But you did touch on this a little bit. You're saying that you can't direct dark things. You want to have hope. You want to put hope into the world. Um, beyond that, how would you describe your brand? What is distinct about the Brenda Chapman voice?
Um, well, I don't mean to say that I don't have dark things within the films I work on, or
Right.
that I mean, Come Away had some really dark stuff in it,
Yeah,
but
I still came away with hope, right?
yes, yes, and I think that's it. I like, uh, I think I like, I'm just, I, I think what I do, I love fairy tales. I love the whole sense of the Grimm's fairy tales, and even the dark ones,
Yeah.
they usually come out with a sense of hope. And I think I like darkness because without darkness, you can't have light.
Oh yeah,
It's,
me
I like the
too.
contrast. So the other thing I don't like is happy, 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 happy with just a little bit of happy, happy, happy. Oh, and it's happy at the end. No,
Yeah, yeah, me either.
not keen on that either. Or talking down to an audience. I don't like
Oh
that either.
yeah,
Where
yeah, yeah.
with when so many family films, I feel like they've whoever has made a decision to sort of dumb it down. They think that because there are kids watching that it can't be too sophisticated, and I so disagree with that. So
Me
I think
too.
that's why the Pixar films are so successful. I think that's why Disney films back in the day in the 90s were so successful, because they weren't dumbed down. They actually had some real emotion to it. So I guess my hope is that what you feel when you're watching a film is real, and it doesn't feel surface, that it has depth.
Yeah.
that you can mine it on many different levels, no matter what your level is, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 80-year-old, and everything in between. I'm hoping you will find your sweet spot within that story and within those characters to so that's I make films that I want to see. I make films that entertain me. I
Mhm.
and I hope that what I like, other people will will like. And I think most filmmakers are like that they make films that they would like to see. So
Yeah.
I don't. I want a little joy, and I want a little sadness. I want heart. I want I want to feel it. That's what I want to.
Yeah.
That's what I like in my films.
And the point that stood out to me the most is what we were saying was not talking down to an audience. And
Yeah.
I think that is a strong component in your brand as a person, like interacting with you. I've never felt talked down to. Actually, I mentioned before the show that when I first met you in person, it was like I was meeting a friend from high school. Because I remember it probably differently, but it seemed like you jumped out from behind somebody and said, "Scott!" And it was like, "Hey,
I think I did, yeah.
I'm so pleased to meet you." And there's no amount of condescension or I'm the established director and you're the lowly, animator. There was none of that in you, and so it was truly a joy. One of my best
slap me
memories.
if I ever get to that point. I give you permission
to fly over there and slap you. Okay.
Yes.
Well, maybe I'll send something in a box, like a little hand. Especially during quarantine. Maybe we're going to be in another quarantine or something.
Okay.
But awesome. I like that. Thank you for your thoughts on that. So if a director hadn't ever worked in a major studio for one reason or another, like Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, what is an important thing that they would need to know about being a director and getting their work to the same standard of quality, or the work of their team?
Are you talking if they're doing it independently and
Yeah,
not
for an independent
okay?
type of film.
I think don't settle. And I would say an independent animation director definitely board and reboard your film over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Get as many eyes on it as you can to give you feedback. And I think the key is on the feedback is listen to what they're saying underneath. You don't necessarily always have to take their solutions.
Yeah.
Listen to what the criticism is and see if it feels right. If it's like, okay, there isn't enough emotion in that section, or we need to speed up there, or just look at the core of what they're saying and not necessarily the specifics of the solution.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that about the core.
Yeah.
Also, they haven't spent as much time with the story, right? They
Right.
don't know exactly what the structure is and what all the
Right.
characters are going through. They're just experiencing it for the first time.
Right.
And that's something I've noticed doing these books. They've been very, very valuable because I'll give them to somebody, I get lots of feedback, and then I completely rewrite the book several times. And that's one thing I noticed is that they'll say one thing and they have a solution for it. And I, knowing the story and the characters, I'm like, that's not the right solution, but you're onto a problem, right?
Exactly. That's
you're onto something.
Yeah,
And,
that's it.
And then in our conversation, if I'm able to converse with the person that read the book, which usually I am, then we can come up with a better solution together. And that's been a really rewarding experience. So,
but that would be the thing I would say is the story is the most important.
Yeah.
So there's a saying that the best animation in the world can't save a bad story.
Yeah.
But the worst animation can't necessarily kill
ruin
a great story.
Yeah. And I've seen films that is very true.
Yeah, that because it's the story that engages, and it's not to say you want bad animation or a bad production value, but sometimes if you have this great story and you don't have the money to put into the production value of what you're putting on screen, you can budget it to a sense of design and style that might fit a budget better, instead
Yeah.
of, I would say some of the ones that I feel make it hard to watch are the ones who try to be Pixar quality, but they don't have the budget to be Pixar
Yeah.
quality in the look. So I'd say that is a flaw that needs to be, looked at. It's like, okay, we don't have that budget, so how can we make a look that is still beautiful but within a realistic approach,
Yeah.
no budget. So
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I actually love that point. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to take $100 and make it 1,000, right? If
yeah,
you're trying to, because you only have so much more money and so much time, and you want to pay your artists fairly, right?
right.
And so, what do you sacrifice? Well, you've got to sacrifice some aspect of the quality without it ruining the look. I guess is kind
Right.
of the idea.
And here's another thing that having done workshops and speaking engagements and different things around the world
Mm-hmm.
is that in the United States, everybody tries to emulate Disney or Pixar, that look.
Yeah.
But in Europe and in Asia and all these places, they don't necessarily do that. They find a style that works for the story.
Right.
They're not trying to fit into something. And I wish more people would do that here. It's like, okay, you want to make an animated film, find the look of it that is um, its own thing, like Dice
Tsutsumi.
Tatsumi. Yes,
Yeah,
and
we
they're
actually interviewed Robert Kondo a couple episodes ago
yes,
about the Tonko House process.
yes, that they have their own look. They have
Yeah.
created their own thing that they can do, and it's it's beautiful, but it's its
Yeah.
own thing. That's one of the rare rare examples of that. But you could go even further than that. So it's like, so if you have only $100 as opposed to 100,000, what can you do for that $100 that's going to look amazing?
Yeah.
That still, you can still find that amazing style. You just have to be clever and search for it. So yeah,
Yeah, I
okay, I'm
agree.
off my soapbox now.
I loved that soapbox, and actually, it helped me feel better about something that happened during Layers. Was I won't say what short film it was, but there was a beautiful short film that every step of Layers production, that short film would come out with something. Like something would happen with it, or this thing would happen, or that thing would happen, and it was always when I hit a benchmark on Layers, that thing would come out and outshine it.
Ah.
And it's like it would always make me feel down on it, like, oh well, I'm not having that success. I must be doing something wrong, right? And it wasn't until after a little while where I was talking to somebody who sat next to me, and they were talking about how amazing my film looked as I was showing them some finished pieces, and I was like, well, it's not amazing as, and I brought up Moana or something, and they're like, no, it's just as amazing, and I don't still don't agree with them, but but I think it was because I was doing that. What you're talking about was I was saying, okay, this is the standard in my mind, and not realizing like this is really amazing that I'm doing this alone in a short period of time, and
absolutely,
and I think it's good to give all our listeners and the artists out there permission to experiment.
Yeah,
do what you can with what you have, and
exactly.
you don't have to be Pixar because you're not.
Yeah, and be creative. What is your individual creativity? Let that show on screen. It doesn't have to be that look. Pixar has their look and it's great, but that's Pixar. So what is your look? What is that look?
Yeah.
Find it and embrace it. And
yeah, I love that. And it actually makes me think of a story that's not related to animation at all, but I think it's a cool story. I think it's in a book called The Third Door, where they were talking. It might not have been that book, but they were sitting there. I think it was Walmart or Amazon, but Walmart and Amazon were both involved, and one was doing really well. I think it was Amazon was doing really well, and Walmart was trying to figure out how to be Amazon, or how to beat out Amazon, or how to incorporate what they were doing. And after a while, they finally sat down and said, well, we're not Amazon, we're Walmart. So what are we going to do that's specifically Walmart? You know, so
Yeah.
they're no longer competing. They're just providing a different type of service that people can use in a different type of instance. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
So not that I want to be Walmart, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah. So and here I am touching my face during the. But I'm quarantined. We're good. I'll wash my
Yeah.
hands.
Yeah.
So, what are things that you wish directors in general and maybe studios and producers did better in this industry?
Be more human.
Yeah.
Show compassion and kindness to the people they work with. I did discover in live action it's a much harsher working environment,
Yeah.
much harsher and unnecessarily so. I think, and I just I experienced and I saw a lot of bullying going on, and it was hard for me to uh, struggle through that. It just sort of blindsided me a little bit. I wasn't expecting that. Where my experience in animation, for the most part, is that I work with a lot of kind people who have uh, the same desire to uh, make a good film and love what they do. And I just found that there was a lot of fear in live action, fear of where the next job was coming from, and fear of their supervisors and their, and it was just an odd, just a different experience. And if I did that again, I would work very hard to change that atmosphere on the set. And I know there are some directors who do that, like Ron Howard, and that they have a kinder set,
Yeah.
a kinder approach, and do well because of that, and I forget the question now. I'm sorry. What was the
It
question?
was it was what some things you're still answering it, but what were some things that you wish directors in general did better in this industry and
Directors
producers
and
and
producers. Yeah. I that is the big thing, is
yeah.
just being more open and more human. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just find they get too much in the corporate field. They're very harsh. It's always bottom line. It's always schedule. But let's see how people feel, and I think that's going to open up the creative process and make
Yeah.
that whole. It's hard to be creative when you're stressed out. I don't believe in the conflict creates creativity. I just I've heard that so much, and I just I don't think that's necessary or true. I think
Yeah.
that's
It's interesting. I mean, I think maybe when you're recovering from conflict that can generate good things
oh
creatively, but
yeah,
I don't think the conflict itself is the
is the impetus for creativity. No,
yeah.
um, yeah. So I agree that the recovery, when you're trying to heal from it, then it opens up things. But I think you can be extremely creative. Limitations and conflict within a story, is great to have, but I just don't think necessarily while you're working on it you have to be beaten up to be creative.
Yeah, and I like how you point out that fear has a huge component in it, in in that process of like why people were acting the way they were, why they were acting harshly. It was fear based,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think that's one of the hardest things for humans to admit is that they're fearful about something. Some
yeah,
humans,
yeah, yeah.
but there's a book called Choosing Clarity by Kimberly Giles that I love. She's a life coach, I think, and she just talks
Okay,
about how to identify fear in different aspects of your life and behave better, and how to understand that when other people are misbehaving, it's because of fear.
right,
And how can you help them in that instance,
right.
and I think I have worked at one studio of all the studios I've worked at that they were very fear based, and the the animators complained about suffering because of it, whereas like I don't think it needed to be that way.
Right. Well, it doesn't.
And
It really doesn't.
yeah,
But it depends on who's in the at the helm,
right.
and that does trickle down. So if they're
It does.
fearful and they're stressed out, that will trickle down. So
Yeah.
how do you help the leader? you know, Sometimes they don't want to be helped, or they don't know that they need help. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we're going to close here with the Get Wiser moment, evolved. So I I used to ask the question of what moral responsibilities does a director have, if any, to the world culture? And generally I would get some sort of an answer that came to truth. Tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. Got to have truth in it. So now we've evolved to this question. It's what do we think, or what do you think is, oh, no, that's, okay. If my goal is to get the highest potency and clarity of truth into a film, what approach would you recommend?
Um, it's, again, I go back to the character and having empathy for that character and creating a character that people can follow and root for and relate to. And so therefore that is the truth that you're putting into that film. So it has to come from the filmmaker's heart.
Yeah.
And that's where the truth comes from.
Yeah.
I don't know quite else how to expand upon that.
That's a good answer. Yeah, I'll just keep asking the question until I start to see the common patterns, and then the question will probably evolve again. So
yeah,
I love that answer. It's very simple and to the point. So thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for this wonderful interview. We're actually about done here.
Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been a wonderful pleasure with you as well. And is there anywhere where you'd like people to follow you or connect to you online? I know you recently shut down your website.
Yeah, sorry about. Yeah, I just have a public Facebook page right now, so eventually I'm not actually doing much with it at the moment.
Yeah.
So, but there is a website coming up. My husband and I have started our own production company, Twas Entertainment.
Yeah.
And it'll be twasentertainment.com.
Oh, great.
And that will be online soon.
Well, I'm very excited for that. I'm excited for what you're doing at Twas and all the things I've heard about it. It sounds wonderful. So
thank you.
Thank you. And until next time, enjoy.
All right.
You have been watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser, audio version edited by Kiera Horowitz, produced by Lauren Chaikin, copyright Scott Weiser, LLC, 2019.